Welcome to Strength in the Numbers. My name is Andrew Codd, accountant, author, and commercial finance entrepreneur, and it's my job each week to bring you leaders in finance and business and deconstruct with them their real stories, insights, and hard-won lessons into practical advice on the key strengths and qualities you need to remain relevant in accounting and finance today, as well as the steps you can begin to take to elevate the impact you make to have a fun, successful, and rewarding career in accounting and finance. Now let's go over to the show. Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's Strength in the Numbers show. Now, how useful is the FP&A, the Financial Planning and Analysis Department, in creating value for their businesses? Because in a recent finance trend survey, 70% of CFOs named FP&A the function as the top priority for them to transform and gain more value from. So how do we make it happen? Well, on this episode, we go back over 4 guest mentor interviews and distill from them their experiences in positioning FP&A in ways that create more value for their enterprises and organizations, not only to meet the demands of today, but also to benefit from developments into the future. And what's more, those guest mentors draw from countries internationally, so loads of great advice in there. And if you enjoyed the episode, please let your friends and your colleagues know. We're on all the major platforms: iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and YouTube. And really appreciate you investing your time with us today. So without further ado, over to the show.
Finance is sort of in a changing environment. You talk about big data, artificial intelligence, deep learning. For many years, finance has been trying to fill in a strategic role. It has always been on the high end of the agenda, number 1, 2, or 3, more strategic development, and then you see how much are you investing in training your personnel on strategic planning, 0 or none. So there's always been a gap, and now I just see there is no option. You either, as a CFO, try to do everything and get stuck in the middle again, or you start splitting it up. I really see the opportunity in getting finance and the transactions part separated from, let's say, the business development part. You get the operations, you talk about controlling, compliance, but also data. Your data has to be perfect. Who could be better than the IT department and an accountant? They talk data. You talk to the operations, they have the KPIs. Now, a financial CFO, I think he would like to be much more active and needs to be much more active on the strategic side. So you talk about business drivers, business models, value-based management. Now that's a whole different ballgame. If you split that up in, let's say, a chief accountant officer and a chief value officer, they really add value to the board. What has been happening, for example, in the last 10 years? You have IT, it's been booming the last 20 years. So now you have chief information officer. Risk management, since actually 2001, since the telecom crisis, they have been on the rise. So you have a chief risk officer. Those tasks were under the governance of the CFO. So why not also accounting make that person really in charge of accounting? Imagine what blockchain will do. If you add all that information, it has to be perfect. It's a ledger controlled system. So we know everything about ledgers. An accountant, they work with a general ledger. So they know everything. With IT, you can become a client for the CFO. And then the CFO is liberated to work on business development. Think about the circular economy. Think about all those small startups. Perhaps you want to have a bolt-on to explore new areas within your business. So you want to look forward, you want to understand, but you need to have perfect numbers. So why also be responsible for that? And I think that's a stuck in the middle situation today. The CFO has to choose, or try to do everything and sub-optimize, or start evolving. And in this area, I think financial planning and analysis is sort of the trigger and also the unsuspected, let's say, change agent in this process, because he's exactly working with the data, trying to get into the story and present it to add value to the business. Now, that's why I am very much interested in financial planning analysis, and I like to help people advance in this career.
Yeah, like I know you've written about this previously, but I suppose is that where the opportunity lies for accounting and finance into the future? Then, in terms to really add value, is to either move away from it in terms of towards FP&A, or is there still a role for compliance and controllership, given that you've had that experience in your career as well? Is there an opportunity for both to coexist, or is it in the same organization, or is it in effect splitting it up in your mind? What's the best way?
In my mind, I would split it up, and actually upgrade the accounting level, like a chief accounting officer, and I do not want to say downgrade the CFO, because most CFOs, they are most of the time involved, especially for large corporations, in mergers and acquisitions. You have a corporate business development. Those are ex-financials or people who want to go into private equity later. They talk all the time about valuations. So it's and they investor relations. So the CFO is already in that strategic role. He's already been able to externalize or outsource most of the transaction services. So he should have more time available, but don't get stuck into the data. Delegate that to somebody who is really, let's say, who should be compliant and be on top of it. That's my understanding, and I would say then you can get quick wins, or you get really advancement. If you look at the top 50 Fortune companies, everything is outsourced, and then we're talking about 10 years ago. So HR was outsourced, contracting was outsourced. You talk about accounting in different countries, invoicing in different countries. It was all outsourced. Why? Save money. And locally, the controllers there, they had to have a new role. So they started to advance more in financial planning and much more in business partnering. So actually, it's a natural evolution of finance which is happening. So I would suggest go on.
Yeah, keep evolving,
Yeah.
keep evolving. So I suppose, let's say, in terms of that, keeping with that theme of evolving, what things should aspiring financial analysis and planners be looking to be doing so that they're evolving in the right way in your mind? So I suppose, what should they be looking out for? So over the next, say, 12 months, to remain relevant and be part of that evolution in finance, what things could they be doing now to make sure that they're evolving in terms of towards doing the right financial planning and analysis?
If I think about financial planning and analysis, my keyword always is forecasting. It's a central theme. So you have to understand business planning. What is impacting the forecast? So you think about scenario planning. If there is the dollars going up and down, or if with the Brexit, or if there are trade barriers, what will happen to the supply chain? What will happen to your clients? Interest rates might go up, which is actually happening already. So what will happen to your clients? Will they purchase in the same amount or not? What will happen to your supply credits, etc.? So there's a lot of things happening. So the external elements, be aware of what's happening in the business. So you talk about business planning. So for financial working in financial planning analysis, don't wait for the information to come from the company, but see what's happening outside and how it would affect the whole business or the segment the company is working in.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, Richard. I think there's that element of what if. It's balancing, making sure there's good quality data to make some what if predictions.
Yeah, exactly. And you have to talk to management on their ideas. Do they see an urgency or not in your assumptions or your subject? Ask what is happening. What are you worried about? Do you think about your supply chain? Do you think about your IT systems? Perhaps there are some opportunities available. I don't know, because so much nowadays is being automated and being linked together. So much open source is available to all kinds of companies.
Yeah.
So where do you want to develop? In the old days 10 years ago, it was very expensive. Sorry.
We still have a bit left in us, Richard. The old days, 10 years ago, I know, it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Just us using this perspective on reality, it's absurd. But 10 years ago, it was very expensive to change your systems. Now it's open source and you just hire guys to program for you. They all work abroad, that you can buy them by the hour.
FP&A is a relatively new field. It's been around in different shapes and forms for decades and decades. But in regards to the development of it as a separate department within a finance or under the CFO organization, it's relatively new. But that's where I see the future going. So I believe in continuous accounting, and that within the next 10 to 15 years, this accounting close process we go through will be eliminated. And we'll move toward a continuous accounting structure because of the automation that the cloud and other digital technologies allow us. And we need to do that as a people, as an organization, because there's too much data being created. No matter how many accountants and finance people are minted, there is physically not enough of us to manage and analyze this data. And I say, well, there's data scientists and other things like that. And you're right. But the finance function really takes everything and looks at everything through the lens of profit, through the lens of dollars. And so we're very important in understanding, not pure research, but applied research and applying those numbers to actionable things that an organization or person can do. So, when I envision FP&A, I see it as becoming fewer accountants, more FP&A. That's a kind of a tough thing to say because as a profession, we don't like to change. I mean, as accountants, we're just not known as dynamic. I mean, no accountant walks into the room and girls scream, "Yay!" It just doesn't happen. Okay, I mean, unless you're an accountant and you're a beetle or something. But we're just not dynamic individuals, so we don't like change. But in order for us to progress as a profession, in order for the world to progress, to be honest with you, you really need to go on and say, okay, well, I need to evolve my skill set into the FP&A, and there'll be more people in FP&A than there are going to be in accounting in the near future, in my opinion.
And in terms of evolving that skill set, Ken, what may be the 1, 2, 3 key things aspiring FP&A professionals should look towards?
It's interesting. It's you sit there and the knee-jerk reaction, analytic skills. Yeah. But we got amazing tools now to really aid us for that. I think the biggest thing is communication. So I'm having a symposium in Washington D.C. metro area, and we're focusing on the FP&A function for the first symposium. And it's going to be people, process, and technology. And we talk about the skill sets. One of those is people, and people. What type of skills do people need to start learning? How do you involve your FP&A team if they came from accounting or getting their master's in business or engineering or consulting or investment banking, because they do come from different fields, and that adds value to a team. How do you evolve their skill sets to be ready for the next thing? And it's a key question that we're going to be discussing.
Yeah, that's a great question, actually, and there's a lot of thought out there that I think there's a tipping point with diversity in a team in terms of a finance team in particular, bringing people in from different backgrounds, different countries, different disciplines and professions, but we're not all arriving on the same page. Some might be stronger than others, and it's about pulling them together. I suppose.
And I just want to say in gender too. I mean, it's not just because they have two daughters. For what I found very valuable is a diverse team, but also 70% of purchases are still made, at least in the U.S., by women. And and that could be B2B or B2C. I don't care. They bring a different perspective because they're looking at life through a different lens. So I found that you have less congruent think with when you have a good mix. And congruent think of, you have a whole bunch of people in the room. This is what everyone wants to see, right? Someone up on the whiteboard doing something and 10 people in the room nodding their heads. Well, I don't like that. I actually want dissent. I want challenges. Yes. I want to know, and not Same. I want professional challenges. But when you have that different views, you begin to think differently and come up with better solutions, in my opinion.
Oh, this is an interesting question that very difficult to answer just in a few sentences.
I know, yeah.
This is exactly what we are discussing around the globe with our international FP&A boards, the boards that attended by CFOs and finance directors of large organizations. The reality is that everything starts from the culture, and this is currently this is one of the biggest barrier on the way of modern financial planning and analysis. If this is a very traditional culture where a very traditional budgeting and planning process is embedded into this culture, then it's very difficult to change anything. You know, you could be wonderful FP&A practitioner, professional with fantastic team of analysts, but the reality is that probably you wouldn't be even allowed to share your ideas. If company is very traditional, if company prepared set the targets that are probably not so analytical and more judgmental. You know, budgeting, it's all about judgment very often. You know, very rare traditional budgeting process is analytical, independent, and creative process. Very often this is the negotiation between top management and operational directors about the targets and future goals and bonuses. So in reality, this is what is a budget. Yeah, and if you still have this process very embedded in your company, it's very difficult to change it. But though I've seen some situations when it could be changed from the bottom by those very analytical people with some very interesting analytical insights that they can share in the company. So I saw that it's happening already. So the first one, obviously, this is the culture. The second one, people have to be ready. You know, we already talk about traditional accountants. Definitely, they're not traditional accountants. They're not just consolidators of information. And we already discussed this, that people should be thinking outside of the box. They should be proactive.
Definitely.
They also should be quite brave, you know, because sometimes it's not easy in organization to go outside and to say, you know what, but we have to change this, this, and that, because this is what our analytics showing, and this is what we are going to have in the future. And sometimes it's not easy when company doesn't allow this free thinking, and company doesn't allow the ideas, analytical ideas. Sometimes it happens, unfortunately.
It does. Yeah, no, it does.
Yeah.
It does. And can be very frustrating as well.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, to build resilience, to keep going and keep believing in the value we're trying to provide. Very, very difficult scenarios. And I've seen a lot of good FP&A professionals leave and move to other companies where they're embraced. And sometimes that's unfortunately the move. And, you know, I tend to see what happens other times. The finance teams of those business units where they left, they tend to stagnate.
Absolutely.
And,
absolutely.
You know, like that, you know, culture is so important, but you got to give it a shot. You know, you can't quit before you've given it a go, because you learn so much in that process about yourself and also the culture that's going to fit for you, where analytics is going to be appreciated.
It's absolutely true, Andrew. So the best way to lose your best analysts, this is to create this atmosphere where they have to be very political, to think what they deliver to the top management, and so on and so forth. But, you know, another thing which is very important, this is also analytical systems. In many companies, planning systems, they're either outdated, or maybe if new systems were implemented recently, they were implemented with the old model in mind. And what I mean by this, you see, even the way how we model and how we plan, all of this should be changed as well. So it's not a line-by-line planning almost to your general ledger level as we used to do many, many years in traditional management accounting. But actually, this is thinking about key drivers. It's thinking about how these key drivers are going to change. Thinking about outside and internal and external drivers. And also creating the architecture of your model that allows you for very quick, almost in real-time decision-making process. And if you ask me whether many companies manage to achieve it, no, it's not happening yet.
Ultimately, I see FP&A as a valuation exercise, because
Interesting.
the concept behind it is truly assessing and creating value.
I like the way you distill that down to its core essence for FP&A, Rob. So, and there was a lot in there. I could see now why you had great mentors, right? So there's a lot in there. So I want to deconstruct some of those elements. So let's perhaps you mentioned FP&A as a valuation exercise. Okay, maybe what does that look for in practice for someone who's maybe not as familiar with FP&A? Like how would we go and describe that to them?
That's a great question. The fundamental equation in valuation is really price equals cash flow divided by a certain discount rate. So we need to look at each individual piece. We need to thoroughly vet our cash flow. Where is our cash flow coming from? What are the sources of cash flow? Are they financing? Are they investment oriented? Are they operationally oriented? Which ultimately is our goal. At what rate will the market, at what discount rate, that denominator, will the market employ in assessing our potential future risk and reward? And that's cash flow divided by R, and that equals P, price, which really is the concept of value. And FP&A, again, to me, is all about creating corporate value. Now, we might not be, Andrew, we might not be employing that valuation formula in what we do. Say we're simply constructing a pivot table so we can look at how many scarves and hats and mittens and boots we sold. Okay, I'm not trying to knock it, any particular Excel formula or anything, or capability. But simply looking at a pivot table. Well, okay, so we're not at that end, value result yet, but we're starting to get there. We're looking at sources of value when we do things like sort data and manage data and create pivot tables and so on and so forth. So that type of analysis ultimately is leading us to the bread and butter question of how do we create value? Where is it coming from? And where can we create it in the future?
Yeah, I think what you've done there, Rob, is you've probably started with the why, the reason for FP&A being the valuation creation exercise, and gives a reason for doing those hard yards to deconstruct what needs to be done. The bread and butter, as you said, to get towards identifying the proper sources of value, right? So that's why FP&A does what FP&A does. And
you got it.
Really forget that. So I love how you distilled it down to that statement. So I'm glad we sort of fleshed it out a bit. And then there was another key thing in there that I felt really important. I don't want our audience to miss it, right? Is it's making sure we're solving for the right answer. All right.
Yes.
So what would that look like in practice now for our audience? How would they know that they're solving for the right answer? What could we share with them?
Well, number one, we can honest to God, Andrew. Number one, we can open our textbooks. We can go back and open our textbooks. I handwrite my my valuation, my basic valuation formulas every year. All the ones that we learned in college and in grad school. I make a point, number one, of handwriting them every year. Number two is open our textbooks and make sure that conceptually we are going down the right path. And I'll give you an example. And I've seen this in large corporate environments. You don't divide net income, which is an equity concept, by total invested capital, which is all sources of financing, debt plus preferred plus equity. You've mixed apples and oranges. And I see all the hard work of culling data, taking it through a calculation process, coming up with a final answer, i.e., useful business information. But unfortunately, it's the wrong concept. And I do see this through time professionally. And that's somewhat frustrating to me, that we can dedicate so much resource, but kind of somehow be off the mark in our final answer.
And I got thoughts on this, but why do you think we're in effect spinning the wheels on that? Why are we dedicating so much time to something that's ultimately not probably value creating or is useful?
Human nature, actually. Number one, do we really trust the finance theory, okay, that we learned? Because, quite frankly, a lot of functional areas are pretty happy to dismiss corporate finance theory. Because maybe that's not what they learned. And we need a little more trust around the table, I think, at times. So number one, do you really trust the theory? And number two is, mankind's, instinct to go for the busy work.
Yeah, I'm laughing because I can see myself in that sometimes, and others too. But okay, so how do we snap out of that busy work? I suppose it's coming back. You probably answered that earlier, right? It's coming back to that why again.
Yeah, let's start at the end result and work backwards. Completely. Let's take the time. That's a really good question, Andrew. This is going to lead to good, valuable conversation. Let's start at our final model output, okay? And let's nail that down and get it right. And let's start working backwards. Okay, as we move through our calculation processes and back, and then ultimately into our underlying data. And that's a great way to build financial models. For example, in Excel, start at the end result. Make sure you...
So there you have it. Hope you enjoyed today's show. If you'd like to know more about our guests today, their bio, and follow up on the resources mentioned during the show, you can find all the relevant links and more at sitnshow.com. There you'll also be able to get access to earlier shows, read the latest blogs. There's also an opportunity to subscribe to our newsletter, which will give you heads up as to when the next show is coming out, latest events, news, and anything that's going to be relevant to help you have a fun, rewarding, and successful career in finance and accounting. And just before you go, we really appreciate your feedback. If there's something we can do better on the show, something that's not working, or something you'd like to see, even a guest you'd like for us to invite onto the show, someone who you think might be able to benefit you more and also the rest of our community, please let me know. You can email me. I'm at andrew@sitnshow.com, or feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Just drop me a message so I know how you found me and we can connect. And really, it's our community that'll make the show. If we keep engaging and driving each other on, we'll keep on building our strength in the numbers. When all is said and done, if we can do the numbers better and finance better, we'll create more opportunities for ourselves, our friends, our families, our communities, and our businesses. So until next time, have a good rest of the week, take care, and let's keep building our strength in the numbers.